Hey guys, Matt Lighty here, and I was going to talk to you about Faustus today and gold gambling, and I was having a bit of a, mental breakdown, because I know Faustus being the rogue marker NPC in Heist, then transitioned to being the currency exchange market person and then gold gambler. That's all common knowledge. You find him in Act 6, but you could start gold gambling early on. He was the anchor for gold gambling in Settler League when it comes to gambling for bases and then having that thing. Those looking at the wiki to try to find. Let me just double check that it's actually Faustus in case I'm somehow gaslighting myself. Because maybe I'm just misremembering that Faustus. Cause I gambled 15 million gold so far this league, and maybe it's not Faustus, but I'm looking at Faustus and it definitely is, and definitely says gamble for items. The control left click option doesn't exist. Only June has a control left click option for unveil, and that you just do by right clicking, but Faustus doesn't have gamble for left click. Okay, but it is Faustus. Alright, I'm tripping absolute fucking balls. Alright, so either way, we'll just talk about it from here. So, gold gambling exists with Faustus and basically has a certain set amount of outcomes, and the outcomes do change, and the cost of the gold scales based on the character level you're doing it on. So, case in point, if I'm looking here at Evasion Int Helmets, on level, it's 1,493 gold on a level 38 character. If I'm on a level 98 character, the cost of that same helmet is 3,005 gold. So that's interesting because it's twice as expensive to do at a high level character than a low level character. But is there any other benefit aside from just the fact that it's twice as cheap to go for things? Well, it totally is. And the reason is because Faustus operates not the same as an Ancient Orb, but he operates in a way that he presents you with a base that can occur at that level. So if I'm level 98, I can get every single Evasion ES helm in the game, which is great if I'm trying to get bases that are level 86, which is the cap of the level. But if I'm trying to get a low-level unique, i.e. the Gull, what I spent 15 million gold getting, well, Raven masks cap out at 38. So there's absolutely no reason to be doing gambling past the level that the base you're trying to get is at, because you're just diluting the pool. Now, it's not necessarily making the odds of you getting the unique intrinsically higher. However, it is making that base occur so much more frequently that you're rolling the dice to then get those uniques so much more likely. That is my current understanding of Faustus and how it works. Although, again, there's no literature on it, really. Basically, if I'm rolling more Raven masks, I should be getting gold more likely than if I'm not rolling more Raven masks. Even when I control F gold on Faustus, but despite him being the gold vendor, there's just no reference of him doing that. The only real reference to gold is when looking at the wiki, it has a subsection that says players can gamble for items of gold to buy a piece of equipment of random rarity. Then when you control F for gamble, it's the only reference to that. So there's just really no literature on how this even occurs. If we look up gambling, there's nothing really. You can see Gwen the Gambler comes up, and she works as a similar function, which is she offers you uniques, well, items at a certain base, and then the rarity can go to unique. But it's also a similar way, but if you interact with Gwennen in a low level, you're much more likely to see low level bases, ergo much more likely to have them become uniques, meaning the intrinsic way your things go unique doesn't necessarily go up, but you're rolling the dice much more frequently. There's something like a Headhunter has an equip level of 40, meaning that if you do anything with a level 40 leather belt from that place, it should be fine, or any place the leather belt should be present, you should be fine, which is 8. However, we know that it has a drop restriction of 75, so I just do not know how this works with Faustus, and there's no information I've seen as far as how drop restrictions work compared to how it works for Ancient Orbs. For Ancient Orbs, it doesn't matter. Once you have the base, it should be okay. But we know that Ancient Orbs do work with an item level mechanic, meaning unlike the Chance Orb, Ancient Orbs are influenced by base items level to determine the outcomes. In general, the item level must be equal or higher to the drop level unique. If no drop level is typically specified, then it matches the character's equip level. Base items under 40 trees as though they were 40, meaning that's the bottom for that sort of thing. So obtaining this is an example, and I did a video about this a while ago regarding, for those who remember, regarding Lacostanes, and it fucked the market back when I played trade. But, so if you get a 2x4 shield like a Lionize, and you Ancient Orb it, it's only outcomes at a low level or Lacoste, Troll Timber, and Titicus band. If you were to Ancient Orb it out of a Lionize, it'll never be able to go back into a Lionize because the Lionize has a level of 73. That's where it's the drop level, right, because of the actual item has a restriction. So Ancient Orbs are fucky, but I don't know if Gold or Gwen works the same way as Ancient Orbs now. I have no way of determining, and the wiki does not specify. So I am operating on the assumption that chance orbs do not care about the item level base, therefore Gwen and Faustus gambling do not care about the item level base, but they care about when the item level spawn, which is why doing Faustus at a low level, which then spawns more low level bases, should overall increase the rate. However, I am 15,000 gold in. I'm trying to get a tier 2 unique through Faustus, of which a third of the outcomes are of the base that I'm chancing, which then puts it at roughly a 1 in 5,000 for chance orbs. However, we know if Faustus operates through chance orbs, it's working in a similar way that this works, and then it is multiple tens of thousands of uniques. So, by that same logic, the amount of times you hit a gold item from Faustus should be represented effectually at a similar rate of a chance orb. So if that's the case, and it costs 1,500 gold on average to get a evasion Raven mask, right? And it's 1 in 3 times, meaning it's 4,500 gold is equating to what would be my scour chance if it's the same rate. So if we're doing that from tens of thousands, we'll just assume it's half of tens of thousands, being 15,000. Then you're looking at an average of 67.5 million gold to hit a tier 2 when it's a singular base if you're hitting it often. However, we know that Gwen rates are actually, I just dinked a glass, I don't know if that came through. We know that Gwen rates are actually much, much higher on average than what would be the scour chance rates. So all the math is basically irrelevant because we know that Gwennen works in a different way altogether. Now, Gwennen's formula has been changed. I don't even know if they reference it. In 3.15, increase the chance of players getting rare unique items. In 3.152, she gets more corruptor influence. They said does not affect the rates. And then 3.25 that just says dialogue. But we know for a fact that Gwennen has been nerfed multiple times since then, just by people's sample sizes, i.e. spending 10,000 astragali getting a Headhunter Mageblood, now people spending 100,000 not seeing either when we have large sample sizes. So that's been a totally just undocumented change. But we know that she operates higher than normal. So the question is, does Faustus? Even though the wiki just wants us to think that Faustus doesn't have anything to do with gold gambling, even though he's the person we use for gold gambling, and the only references to really gold in general, when mentioned at all, are the fact that if you go to the wiki pardon of gold, there's one line saying players can gamble for a piece of random rarity, which, what does that even mean? So, in summation, Faustus gambling for uniques, if it works, it's amazing, but I'm very suspicious that the rates, if near similar to chance orbs and less similar to what Gwennen is, even though we know that her rates were technically increased, although Shadow massively nerfed, is probably somewhere in between. I mean, maybe that 65 million might be closer to something like a 33 million for a tier 2, which is atrocious because if you were to extrapolate the tier 2 rates up to a tier 0 rate, you know, you're probably going to be adding a couple zeros, and spending 3.3 billion gold to get a Mageblood might be a bad vibe. But we also know the best gamble is the one that works the first time, so nothing really matters. Either way, I think Faustus gambling for basis is still fantastic. He has a similar rate when it comes to using Gwen, but it's obviously a much more fluid currency in gold. So if you're trying to get things like an ID4, you know, Amethyst Ring early on, or even getting an early 5 or 6 link, although there's no mention of that through the gambling for items. When it comes to Faustus, it definitely he has a much higher rate of giving linked and chromatic and socketed items in general. So Faustus good for 6 sockets, 6 links, high tier bases. I think ultimately bad for specific uniques of high tiers. Although low tier uniques, 4 and 5, no problem. On the road to me attempting the goal, I found 30 will clashes, 30 whatevers. So if you're playing a build that has a high frequency unique, so something like an honor home at 12, it makes absolute sense to get a character to level 12 and park them there and just roll strength int helmets, and you're gonna get honor homes really, really frequently. You know, there's no other outcome in strength int at level 12. So when you hit a unique, it's always an honor home. That is great. So similarly, if you're playing something like a cold, trickster, exsanguinate type build, or anything that usually want to do fizz conversion to cold, Hrimsar at level 9, camp a character at level 9. You know, gamble goat hide, you gamble dex gloves, you're going to get Hrimsars out the ass. You have tons of corruption bait then. But for things that are more rare, it just doesn't make sense, unfortunately. So I think that Faustus for gold gambling for rares, bases are super good. Low tier uniques that are very, very low tiers, you can camp characters because you do want to level a character 9, sit them there. That way the only things that will spawn is goat hide gloves, and you're going to go crazy and have a great time getting all the unique bases you want. That is super, super good. So that's where I think where Faustus really shines. It's unfortunate we don't have more math on him. People just haven't really been clocking numbers too much. I've seen a couple whispers and discords about rates, but again, it's all kind of anecdotal. Again, my own experience is my own, so it's like not going to be concurrent, but let me know what you guys have for your Faustus luck. I would definitely recommend early league or even mid league trying to get specific corruptions, like trying to get a LE Weekon hit on a Hrim Sorrow, or even something maybe slightly more rare, like if for your support losing Loctonials or something, I don't know what the fuck, and then you want to get something like a Voln. Definitely it's great for that, but for the most part, if you're not going for tier 4 or 5 unique, something low level, something where you can control the bases, I would not bother Faustus gambling. It is basically a gold pit, especially in a league where gold has been introduced and shippers and mappers are so powerful, even post-settlers. I know Settlers Fever is coursing through many of our veins, and I myself despise it. But if you're trying to get a face breakers, trying to get something low, yeah, go for it. Aside from that, I think Faustus is a scam on wheels. So that's it. I'm Mathew Lighty, and I hope you guys have a good day. I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye-bye.